Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz, back with another Booms and Bust episode featuring Timmy Michell from Code Sports. Welcome, mate.
Hey, Swizz. Thanks for having me on, mate. BBL season well and truly done, and good to be getting stuck into all the AFL now.
Absolutely, mate. There's so much going on as we find every preseason, and this one's no different. We will be talking soon in the our Carlton episode, but while we're here, it's a short, sharp Booms and Busts, and we'll get into it. But before I always jump into it, where do the good people out there find you, mate, if they want to get in touch? And where are you sharing that great content that I know I've been following for quite a while?
The Code Sports website's probably the easiest one. That's sort of our one-stop shop now for all things Supercoach and News Limited Sport, or as people would probably know, I'm pretty active on Twitter as well, or X, so you can get me there. It's Tim_Michell, the surname spelled Michell. So either of those, should hopefully be able to find me on there.
Yep, no, fantastic. And as always for us, check us out on all our Supercoach Insider, everywhere you can find Supercoach Insider, YouTube, Spotify. We are uploading content on both of that, and get in contact with us via Supercoach Insider 100 or Swizz26. Now, our Booms, mate, there's quite a few players that we're all looking at that we think are going to have great seasons. Who is standing out for you?
I think the big one, and a lot of people are probably going to listen to this, Swizz, and say, "Oh, could you be sort of more obvious about it?" But Harry Boyd, who's sort of only officially signed with St Kilda, sort of reasonably recently, and been added to Supercoach on the back of that. Like, I'm really excited about sort of his potential as sort of even an on-field option in Supercoach this year, and that's only sort of been made even more relevant by the fact that we learned that Rowan Marshall's sort of no certainty to be fit for round one, battling sort of a pelvis issue, I think it is. So if Harry Boyd's the number one ruckman at St Kilda in round one, I think that's going to be sort of a really interesting talking point going into the season as to whether we have him on field in our flex position, whether we run him at R3 and just use him as a cash generator, or I'm sure there's people out there that are potentially tossing up using him at R2 as well, and running with a slightly cheaper ruck duo too.
100%, mate. And like the early draw there, I can see them thinking, well, we could probably get away with at least starting Boyd as our number one ruck at St Kilda, because Riley O'Brien week one, week two, the Cats could put up any kind of ruck. So they're not going to be too worried. Yeah, round three's Nanku's a season ruck, but Richmond are going to be pretty poor, and then they're into Jordan Sweet, or Soldo, depending on which way they want to go. So it's not a bad start for somebody like a young Boyd. As much as Marshall would definitely get the upper hand against them, it's probably the best of a worst case scenario for them.
Yeah, definitely, mate. I know he's a bit sort of undersized potentially against some of the ruckmen that he might come up against as well if he's the number one ruckman for the Saints early on. But just so hard to ignore those Sandford numbers that he put up. And yes, like the playing at the state league level is sort of very different to being a number one ruckman at AFL level. But I think every game he played last year, the 20 games that he played for Norwood, he scored triple figures in Supercoach. I think his lowest score for the year was about 115 ranking points. So just absolutely phenomenal numbers in the state league. And he went as high as 266 in one game, which goes to show just how good he sort of can be and how quickly he can potentially score points. Ended up averaging 158 ranking points for the year. And of course, we don't expect that number to sort of translate to AFL level, but he does a lot of the sort of things that you would hope for from a ruckman in Supercoach. Like I liken him to, I don't know, maybe Kieran Briggs in sort of his breakout year. Like he averaged 20 disposals in the SANFL last year, 16.4 contested possessions. So that's where the Briggs comparison comes in, that Briggsy was doing a lot of his best scoring off the back of sort of winning his own footy, and Harry Boyd does a lot of that. He averaged 42 hitouts too, which I don't think is going to be anywhere near that high at AFL level. But more interestingly than that, also 10 clearances. So I think, Kieran Briggs in sort of his debut year is probably a pretty good comparison for what we can hopefully expect from Harry Boyd. Briggs sort of slightly undersized as well, but we know how good he was and how much money he made us in Supercoach, but also the fact that he was averaging sort of 100, 110 as well. Are we going to get that from Harry Boyd? I don't know. But yeah, the interesting bit for me, mate, it's just going to be sort of how coaches use him. I think he's going to be in just about every team, but do we use him on field? Do we use him at R3? Do we use him as one of our two ruckmen? I'm really interested to see how people go with that.
Yeah, for sure, mate. There's a lot to play out there, but yeah, I agree. Yeah, I feel like when Supercoach locks out, it's probably just maybe some people have done auto field teams that won't have him in because he should be one of the most highest owned players coming into the season. And we'll move on to the other side of things, mate. Who are you thinking that probably a bit of a hype player might be, but just not going to get the job done in 2025?
Yeah, I found this a hard one, Swizz. I was going to go with Isaac Rankin, but I think that's probably a bit harsh. I just got some concerns about his durability potentially, and maybe he's sort of the most volatile out of the forward premium options that we've got. But the guy I've settled on, and he's been a reasonably popular sort of buzz rookie of the preseasons, Neil Erasmus from Fremantle. I know that people are looking at sort of him and Nathan O'Driscoll and how good they were in the Waffle finals last year and thinking, well, this has got to be the year that they break into the Fremantle team, doesn't it? But like, I'm really bullish about the Dockers this year. I think they're going to have a great season. And had it not been for sort of a couple of close losses last year, they would have potentially been pushing the top four, even though they didn't make finals. So I think that's going to be a really hard team to break into, Fremantle, and even more than that, like a really hard midfield to break into. We know that Justin Longmuir sort of has his preferred probably three, definitely in Sarong, Young, and Brayshaw. He absolutely loves having those three in there as alongside Sean Darcy if he's fit. But then sort of the fourth banana last year, and who knows what his role is going to be, but it was Nat Fyfe for most of the year. And I think people are probably thinking that if Fyfe plays a bit more forward, or if Fyfe has managed through the season, misses a few games, that might be Erasmus's opportunity. But he's certainly not the only player at Fremantle that's pushing for more midfield opportunities. I look at someone like Matt Johnson, who was a good Supercoach rookie for us, I think a couple of years ago now, and he's a guy that sort of potentially could be one that sort of breaks into that midfield mix for the Dockers as well. So it's by no means certain that Neil Erasmus, as good as he was in that sort of Waffle final series, I think is going to be that guy that steps up and plays a lot of minutes for Fremantle. I can understand with a DPP why people are picking him. He's only 119k as well, but it would not surprise me if he was sub or if he was even sort of out of the Fremantle team early in the season. So I think all those people sort of picking him, unless you're going to use him as a potential loophole early on, it just would tread pretty carefully there.
No, I couldn't agree more. He hasn't been in my side. I've done a bit of a deep dive on Fremantle. Yeah, in most games it was Sarong or Brayshaw as their kind of M1 who was taking the most CBAs. There were a few games where Fyfe still took the most CBAs, but in most games he was either the third or fourth banana with Young, and then Johnson was the clear number 5, with Erasmus only coming into that top 5 once throughout the season. So even if Fyfe does regress, I still don't see him regressing so much where they just not giving him CBAs. You've had Shea Bolton come in who will push up the ground. Like Swilikowski was their sort of 6th, 7th guy last year with Amira, and only took something like 10 CBAs for the entire year or something like ridiculous. It might have been 14. So there's not like a lot outside those main 5 guys. So I think a lot would have to change for Erasmus to get in. And if they are deep in trying to get Warner, I think they're kind of setting up where maybe it's the last year where Fyfe might be their 5th guy this year, with Johnson taking a few more. And then it's just that transition with trying to maybe a Warner instead of maybe one of the younger fellas, and and then he's in for half a season and gets pushed out next year if that's the way they go. So I agree on that part. He's not going to get the midfield time, and I do think he's a massive sub candidate.
And the other part is like he's one of those guys, isn't he? Like, well, maybe he is a bit more versatile than what we've seen so far, but certainly, like most of the evidence we've had is that if he's going to score well, like he needs to play inside mid to do that. And I just don't know if there's going to be those opportunities at the Dockers. And I think the game that you touched on there is sort of an important one. And we have limited evidence of Neil Erasmus as a centre bounce midfielder so far in his career. But round 21 last year against the Bombers was when he had his most opportunities. Nat Fyfe was out of the side, and he had 50% CBAs in that game. And he had 13 disposals, 3 tackles, and scored 47 Supercoach. So not really that exciting. And those are pretty decent numbers to be at 50% of CBAs, albeit he hasn't done a lot. So you would expect if he was to go into sort of the engine room for the Dockers that he would get better over time. But on the limited evidence that we've got so far of him as a centre bounce midfielder, like I'm not completely sold. I think there's going to be better rookie options for us to consider in the forward line and certainly in the midfield.
Yep, no, couldn't agree more. All right, that's our short, sharp booms and busts for today. Tim, thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks, Swizz.
And check us out for another Booms and Bust episode soon. Thanks, guys.